Today I'm going to do a comparison on these two machines. Now these are two very different machines, and a lot of people might be asking themselves, why do this comparison? So the reason I'm doing this comparison is, while they are very different, there is one thing that both of these machines have in common, and that is that they both cut grass. Now the other reason I'm doing this comparison is because I do see a lot of small acreage homeowners or property owners asking for advice on which machine they should get to maintain their property. And when I say small acreage homeowners, I'm talking about anything between 2 and 10 acres. I would consider that small acreage. Now, either one of these machines are going to cut your grass. They're both going to do a very good job. In my opinion, the zero turn is going to do a much better job at cutting grass, but this is a purpose-built machine. It was built for one thing and one thing only, and that is cutting grass. This machine, on the other hand, is very multi-purpose. This is the configuration most people are going to purchase this tractor in. It's going to have the loader and the mid-mount mower. Some even do have a backhoe, but not this model. This is a Kubota BX2670, and it does not come with the rear backhoe. So both of these machines have 60-inch decks. The Toro Titan also comes in smaller deck sizes, and the Kubota also comes in smaller deck sizes. But if you want the 60-inch deck, you have to get the 26 horsepower, which is the highest horsepower engine you can get in one of these little BX tractors. If you step down to the smaller horsepower, it also goes to a smaller deck size. So let's take a few minutes and do some comparisons on some of the statistics on these two machines and why you may want to buy one or the other depending on your own personal needs and preferences. So I'm going to go over the statistics. I really want to stick with some of the statistics which really focus on lawn maintenance. The versatility of this machine is pretty obvious. It has a loader. It can run 3-point hitch implements, which I do a lot of. I use the loader all the time. But I really want to go into that because that's really a comparison. That's really more of a review on this machine, whereas I really want to focus on people who are trying to figure out how to maintain their lawns. And if that's the one thing you're trying to do, I am going to tell you right from the beginning, before we go any further, that a zero turn is going to do that much better than this machine. On the other hand, you may find later, after buying a zero turn, if you do have some acreage, you may want to do some add-ons. You may want to decide you want some livestock later. Different things might come up, and that's when you're going to kind of wish that you would have went with the Kubota. And all of this is assuming that you're not going to just have both. So I did spend the first 2 seasons that I lived out here maintaining my lawn with this machine. The biggest drawback is how long it takes to cut with it, because you do have to do a lot of back and forth. And getting around small trees and shrubs, we have a lot of blueberry bushes and fruit trees, and getting around those can be challenging with this machine. There's a lot of back and forth, and even though it has a hydrostatic transmission, it's still nowhere near as fast and convenient as doing it with a zero turn. Now, the other big drawback to this machine is it is a tractor and it rides like a tractor. It's very rough. My property is not even. It's 5 acres. Most people with that much property, it's not going to be perfectly flat. And this machine will beat you up, and my back hurts after using this machine. Granted, I have a couple little back issues, nothing really bad, but enough that it makes it uncomfortable. Whereas the Toro with the MyRide suspension, which is just amazing, it's a totally different experience cutting across my lawn at full speed with this machine. I get off, I feel perfectly fine, my back doesn't hurt. Again, I can go full speed with this machine, whereas with this machine I have to slow down a lot when I hit rougher areas, just so I don't beat myself up. And so that is a huge advantage when it comes to the Toro with the MyRide suspension system. Okay, I got my little cheat sheet here, and I want to go over several different specs on these machines. The first one I'm going to mention is weight. There's a substantial difference here. The Toro weighs 815 pounds, just as you see it, and that's with the 60-inch deck. Whereas the Kubota tractor with only the deck, not the loader, is 1,850 pounds. So this is more than 1,000 pounds heavier than the Toro. And if you have property that maybe has some low spots or holds water or anything along those lines, that is going to be a big consideration if you're going to be using this to go across your property on a weekly basis. Especially when you consider that the rear tire size on the Kubota is 12 inches, which is only 1 inch wider than the 11-inch rear tire that you're going to find on your Toro Titan. Now, it just so happens that my property it drains extremely well, it holds no water, and even if it is wet, I can come out here in a pouring down rain and drive across my property with either one of these machines. And while it may have water on the ground that hasn't soaked in yet, there's no ruts, there's no mud, I don't have any issues like that. So that was not an issue for me with this machine. That's going to vary depending on where you live and your property. The next thing I would mention is speed, and that's where these are going to really be neck and neck. The Kubota is 8.4 top speed miles, and this miles per hour top speed. This one's going to be 8.5. While that is neck and neck, I don't know how much that drops, or if it drops at all when you turn your blades on. I assume it does. But at any rate, I can go full speed with this mower, except when I hit those rough spots like I mentioned, I do have to slow down. Whereas this one, I can use to take advantage of the speed of this mower continuously. Because of the MyRide suspension, I don't have to slow down with this mower as I'm cutting. And as long as we're talking about top speed, I would say the advantage to this one is that if I go 2 weeks without cutting, and the front of my property has Bahia grass, and I don't have to slow down even after 2 weeks with this machine. I can just go full speed as long as it's not too rough, and this thing will just cut right through it. Whereas this machine, I do have to slow down if that grass gets too thick. It'll you can hear the engine start to bog down just a little bit, so I'll bring it back just a little bit with this machine, but that's expected considering this is a gasoline engine, a 2-cylinder gas, and this is a 3-cylinder diesel. That's not surprising. And speaking of engines and horsepower, this has a 24.8 horsepower 3-cylinder Kubota diesel, where this has a 24.4 horsepower V-twin gasoline engine, which is built in China. I know a lot of people really, as soon as they hear the word built in China, red flags go up. But the fact is the company that makes these engines, it's been around a very long time. From what I understand, they even build some of the motorcycle engines for BMW. They make fantastic engines. Now the next thing that I'm going to mention has a pretty big difference between these two machines, and that's blade tip speed. The blade tip speed on the Toro is 18,908 as opposed to 14,440 on the Kubota, which is a pretty big difference. So the next, we'll talk about the decks. Both of these decks are made out of 10-gauge steel. This one has a bullnose across the front, which is really nice for absorbing any impact, whereas this one has a lip, which is also for reinforcement and absorbing impacts, and I'm sure it would do a great job as well. So as far as the decks go, I would just call it a draw. They're both very good decks. And as long as we're on the topic of the decks, I would mention that these are sealed spindles in this, so you can't grease them. I don't know what the lifespan on these spindles would be. For a residential person like myself, I would expect them to last a number of years at the minimum, whereas this machine does have greasable spindles. It's a tractor, there's grease points everywhere on this machine. So the spindles on this, if you maintain them properly, would last an extremely long time, like I said, provided you do the correct maintenance and keep them greased. The next difference is something that may not be a big factor for a lot of people. It's not a huge factor for me, but it is worth mentioning that the Kubota, and I did I did the best I could estimating the gallons per hour on these two machines. I'm sure it's not perfect, but this machine uses about 0.6 to 0.7 gallons per hour cutting grass, whereas this one seems to use about 1.5 gallons per hour cutting grass. And that's a big difference. But again, that is not surprising considering this is a 2-cylinder gas engine compared to a 3-cylinder diesel engine. Even though the horsepowers are the same, this is a very fuel efficient engine compared to the gasoline. But again, you're not talking about a huge expense, especially as homeowners. I don't know if that's really something that you would take into consideration, but I just wanted to mention it. And lastly, I want to mention price, and this is where the big difference is going to come in. The Toro retails for $61.99. Now I did get it on sale, and I also had a 10% coupon for my neighborhood club membership with Tractor Supply. So I picked this up for not cheap, but a relatively good deal. Whereas this one is gonna, now the tractor alone is gonna run you $13,409. And when you add the deck onto it, the cutting deck, it's going to bring you up to $15,358. So, and that's without the loader. So you're talking about well over double the price for this machine compared to this machine, and that is just in the configuration for cutting grass and running 3-point hitch implements. If you add the loader, you're up around $17,000 for this machine. So it's a very expensive machine, even though it is small, but you're paying for the versatility, you're paying for the engine, there's a lot of things about this machine that are just much more expensive to build than compared to a Z-return mower. So yes, it is a lot more expensive, but it's really, that's where the comparison is going to take a big divide, because you're just paying for a completely different machine compared to this. So, but I did want to mention the price because that is a factor in people's purchasing decision. And I want to do a couple things. I want to show you how smooth the my ride suspension is with a GoPro camera compared to this machine. I'm going to go ahead and get the loader pulled off of this machine so we can do an even comparison. Would never cut with the loader on this machine. I never do. The weight on the front of this tractor makes for, as rough as the ride is already, it being a tractor, the loader on it just makes it twice as bad. So I'll go ahead and get the loader pulled off, and we'll see if we can make the comparison on smoothness, and maybe even do a little speed comparison and cut comparison up in the front. I have some grass that's been growing for a couple weeks out there. Okay, so I got the loader pulled off of the Kubota. I'm gonna go ahead and do a test run across some of the rougher part of my front yard. I'm gonna put the GoPro on and try and give you a good idea of just how much rougher this machine is compared to the Toro with the My Ride suspension. Okay, so now I'll go ahead and take these two machines up front and do a little cutting. I don't want to do too much. I have bees and I have a lot of clover in my front pasture, and I don't want to cut too much of it. But I can make a couple passes and we'll compare the cuts between the two machines. Looking at the cut quality, this is where the Kubota is really going to shine because I didn't hold back on speed, and this is really thick hay grass. So you can see that it's a little better cut because the Kubota just powered through it, whereas the Toro started to bog down just a little bit. On the other hand, when I started to go a little slower, the cut was really nice. And as far as chopping the grass, you can see, hopefully you can see this row here. This is the Toro. And then if you look over here, this is the Kubota. You can see big clumps. Cut at the same 2.5 inch deck height. You can just see the grass so much better over here where the Kubota cut compared to the Toro. It's just chopped up much better, and it's also thrown a lot better. Okay, so that's it for the comparison of these two machines. While very different, they do have one thing in common, and that's cutting grass. And I hope I've addressed some of the big differences between these machines and helps a few people who maybe fit into a very small category, not a large audience, but it is something that a lot of people in my research were debating back and forth, and I was hoping to answer a few questions and help with that debate just a little bit during this video. Hopefully I've accomplished that. If you like this video, please subscribe and like. It doesn't cost you anything, but it helps me a lot. Thanks for watching, and look for the review on this Kubota. I've had it for 2 years. I'm looking forward to a full review on it, and that's coming soon. The Toro, it's going to be a while. I need to use this machine for at least a full year before doing something like that. Thanks for watching.